But I will share an experience I had when I went to Amanasir. I was a national helper at that time, and I wasn't supposed to go because the Quechuan counselor was the one that was supposed to go, and we were very close, and he said to me, "No, you have to go, you have to go." I said, "Look, I can't go, I'm not going." And then he finally said to me, "Look, I'm going to pay for everything." I said, "Now you're talking." So, so I went, and I didn't know what to do, so I just was kind of hanging around. And they had, at the same time, this zonal meeting there, they had this youth meeting. So there were a lot of young people from all over, especially Colombia, I guess, and Chile, and so they all started coming over to me and wanted to test with me. So I thought, okay. Well, it got so bad I had to make a schedule, and I could only take enough time off for lunch and for dinner, and all the rest of the time I would be testing with these guys, which was fine, you know, that's, at least I was useful. And one guy said to me, you know, it's through an interpreter, he says, it's very normal for us to live with a woman, you know, before we're married. He said, and actually, he said, I would like to test if I should dump my girlfriend. I said, really? That's interesting. That's an interesting test. So I just got quiet for a moment, and I said, well, how about if we test, how is it for your spiritual development if you dump your girlfriend? And how would it be for your spiritual development if you marry her? And he said, oh, okay. Which really surprised me because, you know, I didn't expect that answer. So we tested, and he received to marry her, which was really unusual. He came from a family, there were 20 children, his parents, aunts, uncles, cousins, so there were 40 of them in Subud. And a few days later, I was walking someplace, and I see this whole crowd of people walking towards me, you know, and it was his whole family. So we were talking, you know, and he introduced me to his father and his mother, and I asked his father when he ever slept, but he didn't answer me. And he kept going like this, pointing to somebody. And I forgot what we even tested at that time. But he was pointing to the girl that he was going to marry. And she was beautiful. I mean, she could have been in the movies. That's so beautiful. And I thought to myself, what is this guy thinking? I mean, really, you know. Yeah, it was very nice. It was very nice being with all the young people. And, but, you know, mostly they're testing about their own personal situation, and which actually, one of the things that we all should test, I mean, not right now, when we go to test, is how is it when I do Latihan for myself? And how is it when I do Latihan for all humanity? How is my Latihan then? You might notice a difference. Because the Latihan that most people do for themselves is not the real Latihan that Papa said we need to do. We need to do the Latihan for all humanity. He said, from the point of view of God, there's one God and there's one human soul. So when we do Latihan, it's for the one human soul. And at least according to Papa, that's the correct way to do Latihan. And in between, we can work out our own problems. We can correct ourselves and do whatever we have to do, you know. But we should really, all really receive that test, because when you feel the difference then you'll understand a lot more than you know now. And when you receive, you'll receive something that's maybe different from how you normally receive. And if you do that in your regular Latihan, it'll grow by itself. It'll keep growing and growing. Some people see a blue light in Latihan. Anybody see a blue light in Latihan? Yeah, you see a blue light? That's the color of the vibration of your human soul. So, and the gold, which, you know, in Subud there's the blue and the gold. The gold means to love yourself. And that's according to Siddhartha. So if it's wrong, please don't blame me. No, but I'm sure it's right. And Ibu Rahayu spoke about the sukmas. The sukmas are our flying bodies, our astral bodies, and they're in 4 different colors. There's the material, which is black, the vegetable, which is red, the animal, which is yellow, and the human, which is white. And when those 4 come together, they become brown. And that's when you receive understanding. You'll be able to understand everything that you receive and about the Latihan. So far, I see only the 4. I haven't seen the brown yet. They haven't come together yet in me. So it's not time yet.
Are these like auras?
Well, no, they're not auras. They're actual spiritual bodies. And they're in my physical shape. But they're made of light. So I don't know why I'm able to see it, but I've been able to see it from very early on in Subud. And when I was in Chilandak in 1971, I didn't have the white one. Didn't have it. And I came into the compound. It was about between 6 and 7 in the evening, and I was walking behind Bapa's house, and I was made to stop. And all I could do was look up. I couldn't move my body. And I looked up, and I saw this pure white ball of light come down, went into the top of my head. My whole head became white, and then went inside of me. And then I was able to walk. And ever since that time, I see my white sukma. So my human sukma. Why I didn't have it, I have no ideas. It's probably because of my ancestors that, you know, I just didn't have it. And God willing, I'll see the brown one eventually. But I'm only sharing this because Ibu Rahayu spoke about it yesterday in her talk. And I guess it's an important thing that we should experience. And maybe it's because I always tried to put the Latihan into my life. Right from the beginning, right from when I read that thing that Baba said. And I'll share another. I used to be a house painter. And I didn't like that. I mean, I hated it, actually. But when I went back to work because I came into Subud and Baba said we should work. So I went, and I belonged to the union in Brooklyn, New York. And so I was painting something in the morning, and in the middle of the morning I was working with another guy, and the whole room became filled with light, golden light. And I looked over at the guy I was working with, wondering if he could see it, but he was just working. He didn't notice anything. So I went into another room, and I just felt my Latihan. Just felt it for a few minutes, And then I went back to work. And then in the afternoon, in the middle of the afternoon, the same thing happened. The whole room became filled with light. So then I went into the other room. Again, I felt my Latihan. And what came to me was that God wanted me to stop every now and then and remember God, feel the power of God. And then the light didn't come back once I understood it, you know. So I always did that. I started with that. And I would be anywhere. I could be in a restaurant. I would just sit and try to be quiet, you know, and I would feel the dull vibrations at that time, which is all I could receive. And, but that was fine because I always felt that's the Latihan, you know, that's my worship of God. So everything was fine with me. I never looked for anything. I was traveling one time, and I was staying at a friend's, Subud Brothers' apartment in San Francisco, and it was Ramadan. But since I was traveling, I wasn't doing Ramadan. I didn't feel to do Ramadan. But I felt to sit up at night and just sit quietly, you know. And I heard a song, came down, went in through my head, and went inside of myself. It was a song about Bapak, called The Man from the East. I didn't know how to write notes, so I got some paper and I wrote the lyrics because I couldn't, and I could remember the melody, you know. And then I thought, gee, I wonder if I could receive another song. Another song came down, went inside, and I wrote down all of them. And after about 4 songs, I started getting confused about the melody, so I stopped. But that was the beginning of my receiving songs. I'll sing you a little of this song, maybe. There is a man who comes from the east. He wears Western clothes. He brings a gift far beyond compare, grace for all mankind. It's a chance for equality, peace and harmony, the brotherhood of man. There is a man who comes from the east. He wears Western clothes. Ordinary man, ordinary man. He's an ordinary man. Some say he's a prophet, a messenger of God. But he says he's just a man, an ordinary man. Baba is the man who comes from the east. He wears Western clothes. Subud is the gift far beyond compare, grace for all mankind. It's a chance for equality, peace and harmony, the brotherhood of man. Baba is the man who comes from the east. He wears Western clothes. Ordinary man, ordinary man. He's an ordinary man. So that was the first song that I ever received. It was about Baba. And I sang that for Baba at his birthday in 1971 when I was in Jalandak. Baba closed his eyes, went into a deep Latihan, and boy, I was feeling a lot of things going on inside of me. And every now and then I had the thought, am I doing it right? And Bapa would open his eyes and go, yeah, yeah. And then he'd close his eyes again and go back into Latihan. That changed my life, singing for Bapa. In my early days in Subud, I naturally couldn't stop thinking, so my mind used to go crazy. Not just my mind, but also my heart, because I would feel, is this really the Latihan? Is this really this? Is it really that? Lots of questions, lots of doubts. But I just kept accepting it, you know. And I also had big, big headaches. For a couple of years, I went through a period where it felt like I had something sticking in my head, and then another time it felt like I had a balloon inside of my head. I mean, I was really went through a lot of purification, and it wouldn't stop. And then Bapa came to San Francisco, and I found myself pacing back and forth thinking, I hope he tests my brain, because I really felt I needed that, although I had never heard of him doing that kind of test. But I just found myself pacing back and forth. Sure enough, when I got into my group, Bapa said, receive the Latihan in your mind. And my brain started to move by itself. It was made to move, just like when you're made to walk or you're made to any movement. And my brain was moving and moving and moving. And my head was getting lighter and lighter and lighter, until finally the headaches were gone. My head was light. I felt just completely in a heavenly state. And that was the last time I had a problem with my thinking. But so when people do some awareness testing, you might want to test where's your brain and how does the power of God, ask God to move your brain, because since that time, if I start to feel a little heavy, I always just get quiet and receive in my mind, and my brain starts to move, my head feels light, and that's the end of it. And then I go back to what I'm doing. So, yeah, and that's for every part of our being. Every part of our being needs to become alive. And then we can actually become purified at some point. Yeah.
I think there's something compelling about what you're doing, this workshop, Latihan of Daily Life.
Right.
Thank you for that, because I know it's not easy to speak freely in a group like this.
Right.
My point is about this. One thing you said to me years ago was, you said you can at some point feel the Latihan moving in your brain.
Right.
And at some point you'll have the experience of literally your brain moving and being purified.
Right.
And at that time, I had never experienced that. But being aware of what you said, I later did experience that.
Uh-huh.
And so I have you to thank for that.
I just wanted to share a few quick anecdotes. One about Isman. When I was first opened in Subud, my first year I went to a Berkeley Congress, and Isman was there. And I had a strong opening, and I was doing lots of purification that first year. But when I went to the Congress, there were so many men, it overwhelmed me a little bit, and I felt less connected to my Latihan. And so I started to think, well, maybe, I feel like I'm far along, or that I'm making progress. Maybe if I just start the momentum going, that the Latihan will take over then. And it was kind of, I felt that it wasn't quite right, but I kept doing it. And Isman came up to me, and I don't know how he knew, but he came up to me and said, stop doing Latihan from your will. He said, just allow yourself to receive. So he picked me out of a room of 100 men and was able to do that. And I never did it again. And it was one of the most, wonderful moments, because I could have gone down one track. I went down a correct track because of Isman intervening. 15 years later, I've tried to do Latihan regularly, but I haven't felt like I've put it into practice in my daily life. But I went to Isman's first workshop earlier in the Congress, and I said, well, where can I start? To put Latihan in your daily life, always, like Isman is referring to, it seems like a monumental task. But if you start somewhere small, and I knew that, I've done a lot of walking in Latihan, and I felt myself walk from the state of Latihan in the regular world. I've been practicing that, and in a way it's like one of the most, the wonderful things of this Congress. One of the gifts that I've been given is the power of intentionality. It's important. It's the effort that Bapak talks about. We surrender to the Latihan, we surrender to God, but we must make an effort as well.
Right.
And so for me, it's been remember God when I walk. And sure enough, as I do that, my legs are walking by themselves. I've been walking all over this Congress all week.
Exactly.
And not from my will. It is really the power of the Latihan that is moving my legs. And an extraordinary peace has kind of enveloped me as I've done that. And the other day, I was walking home, and it was 10 o'clock at night, and I knew my wife was asleep. I hadn't eaten anything all day, and I was hungry, and I was walking home, and the Latihan was walking me home, and I could feel more of what's going around me. I usually walk through life kind of oblivious to what's going on around me, but I could really feel the state of things and the people that I was passing. And I noticed a restaurant. I said, oh, it's open. Thank goodness, and I started to walk into the restaurant. It smelled good. They were cooking good food. And as I walked through the door, my legs turned me around, and I walked right out again. And I walked home, and I got in the elevator and went up to our room. My kids and my wife were asleep in the room, and there was a salad waiting right next to my bed, and a little bit of something. What was it? Quinoa. So I do think there. And the other thing I want to share is it's been really simple. It's actually been very easy, and maybe that's part of being at a Congress. But you start somewhere small,
Right.
and you see what happens. And when I go home, I have a complex job. It can be stressful at times. I'm not sure I can put the Latihan into practice, but I'm going to try.
Yeah.
And the Latihan is only going to work if we allow it to. It's only going to allow us to progress if we allow it to. We have to be open to it in every moment of our life. And then those kind of experiences that you hear about people having, or that maybe you've had yourself, that's when they come.
Right. Thank you, Lord.
I want to share with you how my Latihan works in my daily life. Days ago, I was at Holguín Airport, International Airport. I was at the counter. I gave the officer my passport and the paper with my bill ticket, and I saw she was reading again, and suddenly she took the telephone and called. An officer came from the office, and he spoke with the lady in the counter, and then he asked me, where are you going? Well, I am going to Germany, but first I am going with a scale in England, in Manchester. And what are you going to do there? Well, I answered, well, I am a Subud member. I'm going to visit Germany because I'm going to attend a World Congress of my organization there. I told him, and he asked me, well, what is that? What is that? Subud? Yes, S-U-B-U-D, Subud. It is a legal Cuban organization now, no problem. Then he told me, wait a minute. And he went to the office. Then I did ask. I just stayed very quiet for half an hour, standing for half an hour. I was thinking, maybe I have to go back home. I don't know what's happening. I didn't know what was happening. But I just relied on the power of God. I was there to attend the Congress. So I don't know what was going to happen. Then he came back a bit ashamed. He told me, okay, go to the counter, without saying nothing to me. He explained nothing to me. And then when I took my baggage and put it in the line, but it was busy. And then again, oh, come with me. And he took me to another counter, a prior counter, the priority counter. Well, then the man in that counter gave me the boarding pass. And when I entered the plane, I read seat number 3D. I showed the lady, oh, up there. Then I went in, priority class. And suddenly, I was seated in the priority class, but I was booked economic class. Right. Economic class without meals, without nothing, you have to pay. If you want to eat something, you have to pay. But suddenly, I was seated in priority class. So wonderful meals, everything was for free, and I was laughing because laughing to myself because I understood that I don't know how that was my Latihan working in my daily life. Right. Then when I passed the immigration officer, then the immigration officer told me that I was supposed to fly directly to Germany, not to England first. That was a mistake. I don't know how the mistake appeared, but it appeared and it made me go to the priority class instead of the economic class. That is my Latihan working in my daily life. Exactly. Thank you very much. Exactly.
Can I go back with you?
Hello, Isman.
Hi.
My name is Walter Hanhart. I'm coming from Amsterdam. Oh. And we were just talking about Latihan receiving in the mind. And what I notice when I do the testing often, of regularly, even when the question is being started, the answer is like in the mind. And then I could follow that, but then I'm late with my movement. It's kind of an image or happening which I could make my body follow. What I most of the time do is let it be and wait till my body is starting to react. Do you know that experience? Can you say something about it?
Yeah, well, a lot of times, actually, I receive things in my mind before I even have a question.
Yeah,
like that. It just comes.
Yeah.
So, I mean, that's, when I don't have a question, then I know it's good because, I met with some helpers yesterday. There was a workshop, and they were talking about testing. And I said, well, testing is good, especially if you know the source of your receiving. And they looked at me like I was from Mars. And they said, what do you mean? I said, well, Ibrahim was talking about the different sukmas, the different forces. So you have to know, is it from the material force? Is it from the vegetable force? Is it from the animal force? Or is it from the human force? Or is it from the Rouhani force? And And that's why Bapa set it up so that a whole day one does the testing, because with the hope that the majority of people will be receiving from a good place, you know. And also, if somebody is not in a good state, they shouldn't actually even test. They should say, no, I can't test today. You know, so it's not as simple as just testing anything.
Yeah.
You really have to have we need to gain an understanding of how these forces work in us, because otherwise it's like the blind leading the blind, and it's like we're serving the servants. They become the masters and we become the servants.
Yeah, what I get from it is just repetition, and do it really regularly,
Right.
and not once in a while. Yes.
Right.
Yeah.
Because as Ibu Rahayu said in her talk, the helpers are a problem. They don't understand enough, and they don't know how to even explain Subud to the new people.
Yeah.
And groups are disappearing, and that's one of the main reasons. Because people come into Subud and they don't really know what they're just trying it. They don't really understand what it's about. I mean, I was doing a workshop and one helper said to me, well, I don't believe in God. I said, well, how did you become a helper? Because Subud is only the worship of God. And he said, well, they made me a helper, the other helpers. But so it's a very strange situation. I'm hoping this new Helper's Handbook will help a lot. And what I would like to see is helper training,
Yeah.
or retraining. And I would like to see every helpers group really get a hold of the Helper's Handbook and really follow it amongst themselves and really learn from it. And if they don't want to do it, they let them become inactive. Let them just be a member. Because we need helpers that can want to really help Bapa in his mission, you know, and keep Subud going.
I just wanted to follow up on, to me, the most important thing is that the helpers are Bapak's helpers, which means they know what Bapak said. They bothered to read it.
Right.
So that even amongst themselves, instead of at day one meetings, they don't just talk about really superficial things, which happens, and instead they talk about what Bapak said. Then if they actually themselves feel this way and they become one, Bapak says when helpers work as Bapak's helpers, there's absolutely no problem with harmony, because they're all doing the same job.
Right.
And the other thing is that I noticed very distinctly Ibu's talks as they came to us since Puebla, and probably before, but every single one of them appeared to be two helpers. And this has come because of the groups dissolving, because they don't feel the content. They're not driven by the jiwa.
Right.
And so I recommended in my day one that could we begin to watch Ibu's talks to helpers and Bapak's talks to helpers. That's who they're for.
Right.
Could we do this together? And then afterwards test, which is also what Ibu recommends. And this is the way she says we dissolve the problem in Subud and let Subud grow, which is to move beyond self-interest and be really Bapak's helpers.
I just wanted to share that I live here in Freiburg, and in the preparation work we had a wedding from a Subud member, and when I made my bicycle go to this wedding place in midst of Freiburg, I felt like everybody here is in Subud, because I always felt, where are the Subud people? And I felt, is she? Yes. And it was like making such a difference, not to divide in Subud people or not, because when I go over the street and I see everybody as my brother and sister, that changes the people. So I also bring in this way Subud into the world. That's my experience.
Exactly.
Isman, thank
Yeah.
you very much for what you've been telling, sharing with us. There's one more point, one more issue. Babak talked about the four walls. Is it okay if you tell us something about that?
The four walls?
Yes, thank you.
Well, when we first opened, we received Latihan in our physical bodies. That's the first wall. Then it goes to feelings, and then it goes to our inner feelings, and then our inner self. There's another way of describing it. When I was open in my feelings, which Siddhartha told me, and that's why I had the kind of experiences that I had. And he said it was because of the way I was born. He said that was the justice of God to open me, not in my body, but in my feelings. So, and then there's the consciousness and the understanding. Those are different walls. And what I now know is that the understanding doesn't come until the sukmas become one and become the brown sukma, and then that's when you receive understanding. So that's kind of like the hope that we can all reach that. And consciousness is when you become conscious of yourself and your inner, and the workings of your inner, you know. And but you know, it's all an experience, an individual experience, because how I receive is how I receive, how you receive is how you receive. But Baba did say that the one thing that's the same for everybody is how the nafsus, how the forces work in us, and how our jiva works. So that's the same in everybody. And but the rest you just have to receive for yourself. And the way that I found is by really seriously putting the Latihan into my life. Then things just happen by themselves. You know, I just kept changing and changing, and it was always a surprise. I never knew what was going to happen, and that's it. So it's really up to each person. But the more people that do it, the more we'll have the feeling to do it, because they'll be touched by each of us that are doing it, and people outside of Subud will be touched by that. So I really want to thank all of you for coming here. I really appreciate it. I really feel it's a blessing from God, and hopefully you'll benefit from it. I know in past workshops that I've done, people have told me that they have benefited, so I'm hoping that you will benefit this time also. Keep feeling your Latihan. When you walk out of here with the Latihan. And okay, thank you.